Chargers are going to have a big decision to make when it comes to hiring their next offensive coordinator for Justin Herbert and this Chargers offense. In this episode, I'm going to highlight my top picks for the Chargers offensive coordinator and talk about some of these big names that have been out there that are rumored to potentially be the next OC for the Chargers and why I think that's not going to happen. So if you haven't already, be sure to like, subscribe, Select Judge Podcast on YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also follow me on socials. I am at Electric Edge Pod on X, TikTok, and Instagram. This is going to be a very big decision for the Chargers. I think the candidate that they pick, they're probably looking for some longevity with. This will be Herbert's fifth offensive coordinator in 6 years. So I think they want to have a little more continuity with their OC, get him in an offense that's going to work for not only him, but to get this offense firing as to what Jim Harbaugh envisions this offense can do. So with that being said, let's jump into this episode. I'm going to touch on several of my top candidates that I think the Chargers may go after. So with my coaching candidates, there's going to be a theme here between all of them. There's going to have some connections to Indy. There's going to be some connections to the Rams. There's going to be some connections to the Lions, and then also just some connections to Harbaugh in some capacity. So the first one I want to touch on is Jim Bob Cooter. So Jim Bob Cooter right now, he's the current offensive coordinator for the Colts. He works under Shane Steichen. Now, Shane Steichen still calls the plays for Indy. But Jim Bob Cooter is an interesting pick for me. He's still very young, 41 years old. He became the Lions play caller in 2015 and sparked that turnaround for Matt Stafford and that Detroit offense. He's been with the Colts since 2023. And this year, even with Daniel Jones going down and Philip Rivers coming in, Riley Leonard playing for the Colts, they still finished as a top 10 offense as far as yards per game. So I think this is an interesting one. I haven't seen his name float around too much in the league for head coaching positions either or some other OC positions. The Chargers for this specific candidate would have to request to interview him from the Colts. Now, I think that request may get denied, but I like this pick too because he's with the Colts in 2023. He's had a couple years working for Shane Steichen, and Shane Steichen was the OC for the Chargers when Justin Herbert won Rookie of the Year. It's going to be a very similar offense they're going to instill. I think it's a good pick, but I also think it's a safe pick. As I mentioned, there hasn't been a ton of buzz around him, but it's an interesting pick nonetheless because of the ties, one, to Herbert, but also the fact that this offense was able to put Daniel Jones for some time as a potential MVP candidate. Everyone had the Colts being the one seed for that stretch of times. It's an interesting one. It's one I'd keep an eye out on, and I'll touch on why a little bit later in this episode, why I don't think the big candidates that we've heard out there are going to come to the Chargers. First one on my list is Jim Bob Cooter. Second one on my list, I'm sticking in the Colts realm right now, Alex Tanney. So Alex Tanney was a former quarterback in the NFL. Right now, he serves as the offensive passing game coordinator for the Colts. He was promoted into that role in February of 24. As I mentioned, in that Colts system, working with Shane Steichen. He also worked with Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia as well. He had some roles there with the Eagles. He was a quarterback, played 9 seasons in the NFL. He brings that experience to this offense of being a player, similar to how Kellen Moore brought his experience to the OC job a couple years back. He's young too, 38 years old, up-and-coming offensive mind. I think it's another good call considering the connection to Shane Steichen. I do like the Nick Sirianni connection as well, because that offense has been able to thrive with a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, who I'm not too keen on. It's a name that has been floated around for many other offensive coordinator positions from what I've seen. So I think it's one of those safe picks to potentially bring someone in who's familiar with that offense that Shane Steichen runs, that's going to set Herbert up in a position to be successful and hopefully get this team over the hump that we've seen the past couple of years with Greg Roman under the helm. My next candidate I have is David Shaw. Now, David Shaw and Harbaugh go way back to the Stanford days. So right now, David Shaw is the pass game coordinator up in Detroit for the Lions. He was the head coach at Stanford from 2011 to 2022. He won 96 games as the Stanford coach. Like I mentioned, his ties to Harbaugh. He was the offensive coordinator at Stanford under Jim Harbaugh. He has coaching experience in the NFL. He's worked with the Eagles, the Raiders, Baltimore. As I mentioned, he's with the Lions now. He was with the Broncos in 2024 as a senior personnel executive, and he did interview with the Chargers during their head coaching search in 2024 before Jim Harbaugh was hired. I think this is a great fit as well. That Detroit offense finished top 5 in the league as far as yards per game this year. That run game up in Detroit is phenomenal, and I think that's one of the elements that he could potentially bring to the Chargers. Even though he's the pass game coordinator, they all kind of fit together. I think this makes a lot of sense because of his connections to Jim Harbaugh. It makes a lot of sense because he has previously interviewed with the Chargers. Ownership knows of him and his track record. So this would be an interesting one if the Chargers decide to go this route. I think it's another safe bet area where you get a couple years out of David Shaw as an OC. So I don't have these ranked in any particular order either, but I think David Shaw is another interesting candidate that we should keep an eye out on as the Chargers start putting out requests to interview potential OCs. Next one, this name has garnered some attention as I've seen this past week since Greg Roman's been fired, and it's Frank Smith. Frank Smith right now is offense coordinator for the Dolphins. He's held that role since 2022, has some connections to the Chargers, served as the run game coordinator and offensive line coach in 2021. So he has worked in some capacity with Justin Herbert. In that time, that was the year that I believe Herbert threw for over 5,000 yards. I mean, they ranked 4th in total offense, 5th in scoring offense. Yeah, Herbert threw for a franchise record of over 5,000 yards, 38 touchdowns. So it would be a great fit because of his prior experience with Herbert. Also, Miami's going under a complete change. Mike McDaniel's gone. The next coach is going to bring in their staff. So this may be an interesting pick, and it could potentially be the front runner as things develop over the week. We've seen, just watching, at least I've seen watching that Miami offense, especially the first year Mike McDaniel took over, how efficient that offense was. They made Tua look like an all-pro. I mean, that offense got Tua that massive contract. So the offense had a complete turnaround in 2022 for the Dolphins, went from 25th to 6th. The scoring improved from 22nd to 11th. So I think this is another pick that's probably at the top of my radar right now that the Chargers may put in a request to have Frank Smith interview for that OC job. I really like the familiarity that he already has with Herbert. And also, the numbers don't lie. Him being part of that offense in 2021, Herbert put up his best career numbers that year. So this is one that definitely is at the top of my list, and we'll see as the weeks progress if the Chargers do interview Frank Smith for that OC position. Next one I got, this ties to the Rams coaching tree. So Nate Scheelhaase, he's the Rams pass game coordinator right now. It's the only offense in the NFL averaging 30 points per game. They use a lot of motion formation variations, which I think will help create some mismatches and get things rolling for this Chargers offense. It's a very QB-friendly system that the Rams run. So I think this creates some easy buttons for Herbert in this offense and potentially finally gets his run game going that we've been begging for it to happen. Prior to that, he's worked at Iowa State, improving their points per game, led the nation in 11 touchdowns and 50 yards plus. And a big key here, and this is something that I've talked about plenty on this show, is the red zone efficiency of the Chargers. So working at Iowa State, he improved the red zone efficiency to 2nd in the country at 95.9%. Could you imagine the Chargers actually being efficient in the red zone? You'd have a much different record. And on top of that, Sunday's game against the Patriots, it may have been a much different outcome if the Chargers could have put points on the board in the red zone. Like I said, it comes from that McVay coaching tree. A lot of teams are looking at that as the blueprint for them. The system is built around player strengths, which I think is important, especially to build some confidence, build some continuity in that offense for the Chargers. And I think his philosophy, the Rams' philosophy, would fit Herbert in the sense that it's going to be heavily involved in the pass game, which is what Herbert wants to do. He wants to throw the ball. He's not a running quarterback, and that's kind of what Roman made him to be this year. I think he was 2nd on the team in rushing. Pass identity, going to stretch the field, and it aligns with Harbaugh's philosophy to modernize this offense a little bit, but with balance too, right? Obviously, Herbert wants to throw the ball, but you drafted a running back in the first round. Kamani Vidal has proven he's RB2. So create some balance and get things rolling for the Chargers on offense. So this will be another interesting pick if the Chargers want to find someone. It's kind of under the radar. Like I mentioned, I haven't seen too much about his name being circled for other OC positions. And for him, it's an easy transition going from the Rams to the Chargers. Don't have to move, which is nice. And you get to coach in the same stadium. Okay, let's talk about the big storylines this week about who's going to become the Chargers' new OC. And I don't think it's going to be any of the top 3 that we've heard, which includes Mike McDaniel, Brian Daboll, and Todd Monken. So let's start off with McDaniel first. I think he's going to land a head coaching job elsewhere. There was some news that came out that he'd rather take a perfect fit OC job than a bad head coaching job, which I understand. I don't think anyone of Mike McDaniel's position right now wants to take a job like the Titans or the Browns. So he did interview for the OC job up in Detroit. So that's something to keep an eye on. I just don't think he's a fit with Jim Harbaugh's staff. He's kind of laid back and chill, where Jim Harbaugh and his staff are all business. So I just don't think that piece is going to jive there. I think from an offensive standpoint, he's a great offensive mind. I mean, he got to that $250 million deal with the Dolphins. Like that was his doing, and that was his offense. I just don't think it's going to be a fit, and it may be a one and done for Mike McDaniel too. Gets into an OC position, does a great job, lands another head coaching job elsewhere next year, and I just don't want that turnover for Justin Herbert and this offense. The second big name that we've heard a ton about is Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll had a lot of success up in Buffalo with Josh Allen, which got him the job in New York with the Giants. First year out of the gate with the Giants, he led them to the playoffs. Daniel Jones got a playoff win. I don't think he's coming over to the West Coast. I've heard some rumors that he's going to interview for the Eagles OC job. The Eagles have a very good track record of poaching some Giants. Saquon Barkley is a perfect example. So I don't think he's leaving that East Coast. And I think if he is going to interview for that Eagles OC job, he probably takes it. It'd be nice to have him. I know he had success with Josh Allen, but I just don't see it going to happen. And like I said, he may be another candidate where it's another one and done, has a great year as an OC, goes back into the head coaching cycle, and winds up elsewhere. I don't think Jim Harbaugh and the staff want to put, like I said, that offense and Justin Herbert in a position where we have another rollover. Another name that's been out there, and this was my initial top pick, was Todd Monken. Todd Monken was the former Ravens offensive coordinator. I thought he was a great fit. Gave Lamar Jackson a lot of easy buttons in that offense. That offense under his leadership had done well prior to the season, but there's some other things that unraveled this season. But the news coming out today is that John Harbaugh is going to accept the position with the New York Giants to become their next head coach, and that Todd Monken is going to become the OC for the Giants underneath his leadership. So don't think he's going to be available for the Chargers to even interview him. So unfortunately, he's going to fall off the list and work with brother John in New York. Now, I do want to we talked about a lot of external candidates. I do want to talk about one internal candidate for the Chargers that could potentially happen. Marcus Brady is currently on the Chargers offensive staff. He's the current Chargers pass game coordinator. Joined the Chargers in 2024 under Jim Harbaugh. He was one of the 2 candidates they interviewed for the offensive coordinator at the time. Like I said, it would be an internal promotion for him. He's familiar with Justin Herbert. He has an understanding of the current offensive personnel for the Chargers. He was part of that Shane Steichen coaching tree, did have experience with his time in Indy. He replaced Nick Sirianni when Nick Sirianni left for the Eagles head coaching job. He did work with Frank Wright in that Colts tenure. This would be a easy elevation. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't think so. We haven't heard anything about the internal moves, only besides Nick Hardwick. Nick Hardwick was mentioned that he is going to stay on that Chargers coaching staff. He may get elevated to the offensive line coach. Haven't heard anything about that, but that would be an easy transition. My gut tells me, though, that they are not going to promote Marcus Brady. I think they'll keep him as the pass game coordinator, and I think they're going to bring in someone external, but that remains to be seen at this point. And as far as we know, we haven't heard anything from Chargers rumor land. I haven't seen anything from Daniel Popper, Chris Ream. Haven't seen any reports yet as to who the Chargers are going to hire, or I haven't seen anything as far as who the Chargers plan to interview for that OC position. But whoever they do hire, I think Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz and the rest of the front office really want to get this right. The Chargers are at the cusp. They had 2 years, back-to-back 11-win seasons under Jim Harbaugh, and they're just missing the pieces. Now, one has to be player improvement, which I believe is going to get addressed in free agency. The Chargers have the most cap space right now, and through the draft, which I think Joe Ortiz is going to cook something up, get some additional draft picks to really bolster, one, that offensive line, 2, defensive line, some other holes that they need to fill on both sides of the ball. But the Chargers are there. Now, it's just getting Herbert that first playoff win. I think if they bring in the right OC, get back to the playoffs, Justin Herbert gets that first playoff win, this team is going to go on a run. like I said, they got a lot of things to sort out. Coaching-wise, they're going to have to fill Jesse Minter's position too, because there's no doubt in my mind he's getting a head coaching position elsewhere. Get the right OC in the building. Fix the interior offensive line. You're going to have to make some tough decisions as far as free agency and who the Chargers are going to re-sign or let go elsewhere. But I think this team is on the cusp, and it starts with getting this OC right and putting Justin Herbert and this offense in a position to succeed in the future and get this team to a Super Bowl. We hear it all the time. Jim Harbaugh talks about how he dreams of getting Justin Herbert into the Hall of Fame, getting to a Super Bowl, himself wanting to win a Super Bowl. It starts with this OC hire. And I'll give him all the credit in the world, because it has to be super tough firing a very good friend like Greg Roman. But it was the right decision that he made for not only himself, but for the best interest of the Chargers organization as a whole. But those are my potential OC candidates that I see could come in, revamp this offense, get this offense firing on all cylinders like we know it could happen, and hopefully get Justin Herbert his first playoff win and get the Chargers into a deep run next year into the playoffs. So with that being said, if you haven't already, be sure to like, subscribe to Electric Edge Podcast on YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also follow me on socials. I'm at Electric Edge Pod on X, TikTok, and Instagram. And Charger fans, I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts as to who the Chargers should, one, interview for OC candidates, and two, who is your potential pick for that offensive coordinator position? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Electric Edge Podcast. We have a lot to go through this offseason, so there's going to be a ton of content coming your way, so stay tuned. And as always, go Chargers and bolt up.